Today I'm going to demonstrate mental math using two different properties. The first property I'm going to use is the associative property of multiplication. And I wrote it right here for you guys. The definition of the associative property of multiplication is A times B times C is equal to A times B times C. Well, the difference is A times B is in the parentheses over here and B times C is in the parentheses over here. So basically, the associative property of multiplication means you change the groups. And you also can't use multiplication and addition together. You can only use one of them. So in this example that I'm going to show you today, I only use multiplication. So I'm going to use this property to solve this problem using mental math. Well, I can't solve 20 times 15 in my head. That's just crazy. So I'm going to use this property to kind of break this problem down and solve it. So I think I'm going to break 15 down into 5 times 3. So I'm going to write that. Okay, so as you can see, I wrote 20 times 5 times 3, and 5 times 3 is in the parentheses. And this is where the associative property of multiplication comes in. I'm going to switch the groups or the parentheses so that 20 times 5 will be in the parentheses. Because if I was to try and solve it from right there, I would just end back up at 20 times 15. So I switched the grouping, so it's 20 times 5 times 3. So 20 times 5 is 100. So I'm going to write that down. So now we have 100 times 3. And I can do 100 times 3 in my head. That's 300. So my answer to this problem is 300. And I did it using the associative property of multiplication and mental math. The next property that I'm going to use to demonstrate mental math is the distributive property of multiplication with addition. Now the distributive property of multiplication is defined as A times B times C. And what you do is you distribute whatever's on the outside of the parenthesis to each of the number or letter inside the parenthesis. So A times B times C is equal to A times B plus A times C. You're just basically breaking it down into smaller pieces. And what's different with this property from associative is that you can do multiplication and addition in the same problem, which is what I'm fixing to demonstrate. The problem that we're going to do today with the distributive property is 60% of 60. I can't do that in my head, like I don't know 60% of 60. So I'm going to break the percent down into something that's easier, like 50. And I'm going to put it in parentheses. So 50%, don't forget the percent because that's important, plus 10% times 60. And I did 50 plus 10 because that is equal to 60. So what I'm going to do now, oops, forgot equal, I'm going to distribute this 60 to each of the numbers inside the parentheses, so the 10% and the 50%. So I'm going to do 60 times 50%, again don't forget the percent, plus 60 times 10%. Well, I know what 50% of 60 is. That's 30. So I'm going to write that down. 30, then plus, and then I know what 10% of 60 is. That's 6. So I'm left with 30 plus 6, which is 36. So I just solved what 60% of 60 is by using the distributive property of multiplication with addition by doing it through mental math.